This is the 15mm T-55 kit from the Plastic Soldier Company. A direct descendant of the legendary T-34 series, the T-55 was the main Soviet tank in the 1950s, and is still in service with many countries around the world. This kit builds the original T-55, including Polish and Czech versions, as well as the upgraded T-55 AM2 with laser rangefinder and add-on armour. The back of the box shows a side view of the T-55 AM2, as well as painting guides for Vallejo paints. The box contains 5 tanks. There are no crew figures or decals supplied. If we look inside the box, there are 5 sprues of light grey plastic and a 1-page parts and assembly guide. The parts guide identifies parts for the Soviet and Polish T-55, Soviet, Polish and Czech T-55A, and the T-55 AM2. The various options are covered in the assembly diagram, with different options for different versions. It takes a few moments to figure out, but is clear enough once you know what version you want to field. Here's the plastic. Parts are well moulded and detail is plentiful and well defined. There are a couple of obvious sink marks on the gun barrels. This is unfortunate, but should be hidden when the gun is installed in the turret. One barrel is the standard D10T 100mm gun, while the other is the same gun fitted with thermal sleeves and a laser rangefinder. The tracks are one piece with good road wheel detail. Track detail is somewhat simplified, but this is sufficient at this scale. Placement of the lower sprue gates on the visible parts of the track will mean some careful cleanup here. These really should have been moved a bit further around to the bottom where they wouldn't be visible. The tracks are keyed, but the left and right keying is the same, so it is possible to put the tracks on the wrong way. The upper hull will not fit on if you do. It isn't a real issue, but differential keying would have avoided this altogether. The upper hull piece has good, strong engine deck and fender details. This section also contains the turret armour upgrades for the T-55 AM2, the smoke discharges and side skirts. Here are the turret pieces. The various loader and commander hatches here are for the different variants. There's also a Dushka 12.7mm heavy AA machine gun. The next section has the lower hull, hull rear and 2 front hull glacis plate inserts. Most variants will use the thinner one of these, but there is a thicker up-armoured glacis for the AM2. The external fuel tanks here have an ingenious design which avoids some of the unsightly mould lines common in 2-part drums. One piece has the full circular drum end, which fits into chamfered surfaces on the matching lower piece. A lovely piece of clever design. This section also has a snorkel piece and the characteristic Soviet unditching beam. So that's the kit. A few minor issues here don't do anything to diminish this great kit of an iconic Soviet tank. Detail is good and sharp, and the number of variants you can build from this is substantial, giving wargamers options to include this kit in a wide range of army lists from the 50s to the present day. Let's build one. If we follow the assembly guide, we start with the upper hull. You need to decide on a variant here, as you'll need to know which glacis plate to attach. I'm building a T-55 AM2 modernised variant, so I need the thicker up-armoured glacis piece. The fit for this between the fenders is really snug. I had to do some serious sanding here to get it into place. Try and use something flat like an emery board to keep the edges as flat as possible. Dry fit this until it fits, then glue it into place. The next step is to make the upper and lower hull parts. There's a problem here. As moulded, the rear and front will not mate correctly. The lower hull piece needs shaving back a bit. Use the rear mating surfaces of the hull parts as a guide, and trim back the angle of the front join on the lower hull until they fit correctly. This is fairly quick to fix, and you can cut this back as hard as you like. The suspension will hide any gaps here if you get too enthusiastic. This is an unfortunate error with the kit that prevents it being a simple assembly, but it can be easily corrected. The PSC styrene is actually a bit softer than Battlefront plastic, so that helps a bit. The next 2 steps are the rear hull plate and the suspension. Once you have the hull correctly seated, these pieces go on without incident. The next piece is the turret platform. The T-55's turret armour is wider than the hull, so this piece allows the turret race to overhang the fenders slightly. Step 5 is the basic turret assembly. The top and bottom fit well with no gaps or join lines visible. There's the slightest suggestion of flash around the hole for the gun. A couple of swipes with sandpaper sorts this out, then fit the gun. This is a tight fit, so stick with it. The AM2 variant is the gun with the thermal sleeve and the laser rangefinder. Other options use the unadorned D10T with the bore evacuator at the end. The hull assembly moves on to details like the external fuel tanks, unditching beam and deep wading snorkel. These are all mounted on the rear hull plate. Getting these all together is a bit of a challenge, but in the end the unditching beam helps straighten and support the fuel tanks. The AM2 variant also has side skirts, so this step finalises the hull assembly. Moving on to the right-hand side of the assembly guide, there are instructions for turret details like hatches and guns for the different versions. The AM2 requires a 1mm pilot hole drilled from the underside to mount the wind sensor probe. Then the smoke dischargers, add-on armour panels and stowage boxes finish this up. There are a lot of parts here, and this took more time to assemble than I was expecting. There isn't a lot of positioning guides for the parts either. Maybe use some research sources here. Here's the finished product. The end result looks great. There are a couple of significant issues with parts fit here that are a bit disappointing, but they are easily corrected and the rest of the assembly is pretty straightforward. However, there are a lot of parts, so assembly takes some time. The T-55 is an important kit to have available in plastic, and the number of variants from this kit means it's incredibly versatile. The Battlegroup Northag rulebook adding moderns to the Battlegroup miniatures rules is out next year, but Team Yankee players with East German forces will also want lots of these. Let's do a bit of history. The T-55 is a direct development from the venerable World War II vintage T-34. The need to keep T-34 production high limited further development of the design to upgunning and up-armouring. With T-34 production at sufficient levels later in the war, the T-44 was developed. This retained the 85mm armament in a slightly larger turret, but introduced torsion bar suspension and mounted the engine transversely to save space. The vehicle had similar cross-country performance but was lower in silhouette and had better armour. About 2,000 T-44s were produced and saw limited service, but it soon became obvious a bigger gun would be required. Fitting a 100mm gun to the design necessitated the increase in both hull and turret size, resulting in the T-54. Initially the turret had a pronounced overhang, but this changed over time, developing into a more domed shape that became standard for Soviet tanks. The small counterweight for the stabilization system on the 100mm gun was replaced with a bore evacuator that vented propellant gases. The design continued to develop, adding a more powerful engine, 2-axis stabilization and NBC protection, being accepted into service in 1958 as the T-55. Despite slightly thinner armour, the T-55 performance was roughly equivalent to the heavy T-10, and these medium tanks gradually took on the heavy tank role as well. This was the start of the main battle tank, tanks with sufficient mobility protection and firepower to take on all battlefield armour roles. The T-55 was the mainstay Soviet tank of the Cold War, continuing to serve as frontline tanks into the 1980s. T-55s were used in most Warsaw Pact nations and were exported widely, seeing action in Asia, Africa and the Middle East. Czechoslovakia and Poland also produced the design both for domestic use and export. China produced and widely exported the T-55 as the Norinco Type 59. Despite being an older design, the T-55 is still in service today. Many have been modernised with ERA, side skirts and other add-on armour packages improving protection, and advances in ammunition and sighting systems including laser rangefinders increasing lethality. The improved T-55 AM2 version has side skirts, smoke dischargers, add-on turret and glacis armour, as well as thermal sleeves to the main gun, wind sensors, laser rangefinder and computerized fire control. Many other countries have also upgraded their own T-55 fleets, and although not a match for modern armour, the T-55 is still a frontline tank around the world. Given just how ubiquitous the T-55 family is worldwide, the Plastic Soldier Company kit will find a home in game theatres covering the Middle East, Cold War Europe, Vietnam and Asia, Africa, India and Pakistan and more. Given Battlegroup Northag isn't out yet, let's look at the East German T-55 AM2 in Team Yankee. The T-55 is a tank unit with bazooka skirts and infrared. Bazooka skirts increase the side armour protection to 10 against heat warheads. Not a big increase from their already respectable side armour of 9, but every little helps. Infrared means the unit can roll 2 dice for night visibility and choose the highest result. Courage is 4+, with a morale of 3+ and a remount of 4+. These are well-motivated troops with good fighting spirit, but an appreciation of the deficiencies of their vehicle make them a bit more reluctant to get back in and keep on fighting after being hit. Skill is a 4+, less than the more professional NATO troops but better trained than Soviet conscripts. An assault of 5+ and counterattack 4+ means it can be harder to get East Germans to assault and keep them in the fight when you do. T-55s are hit on a 3+, with a front armour of 14, side of 9 and a top armour of 2. In the Team Yankee time frame, these numbers are a bit marginal against the firepower of modern weapons, so you'll need to take as much advantage of concealment, covering fire and superior numbers to take the day. Although the side armour of 9 along with side skirts rules means you can ignore some lesser anti-tank assets if you need to push up past them. Tactical move is 10 inches or 25 centimetres, with decent dash speeds but a 4+ cross. You'll want to keep these units out of difficult terrain, or use the crosshair movement order to keep these tanks from getting stuck. On to the firepower. The 100mm D10T gun can shoot 32 inches or 80 centimetres. It has a halted and moving rate of fire of 1. Anti-tank is 17 with a 2+ firepower. This is a lot less penetration than later guns, but still able to do some damage. Laser rangefinder means there's no to-hit penalty for targets over 16 inches or 40 centimetres range. Slow firing means a +1 to-hit penalty when firing on the move, so even though rate of fire moving and halted is the same, there is a to-hit advantage in shooting while stationary. The 12.7mm Dushka AA machine gun has a 20-inch or 50 centimetre range, a halted rate of fire of 3 and moving rate of 2, with AT4 and a 5+ firepower. The sheer number of these able to fire at helicopters will help keep hunter-killer choppers under control. The coaxial 7.62mm machine gun has a 16-inch or 40 centimetre range, moving and halted rate of fire of 1, AT2 and a 6 firepower. So the stats for the T-55 don't stack up against more modern vehicles, but they are cheap. 3 T-55s are only 2 points, and you can get 10 for 16 points, so NATO players will have a lot of these to kill. East Germans will want to be using speed and numbers to swarm a more capable opponent, getting in for side shots. You can fit up to 3 T-55s per company with mine plows for just 1 additional point. So given the age of the design, it's a tribute to it that it still has a place on the battlefield. The Plastic Soldier Company's T-55 will be welcome news for many, offering a cheaper alternative to resin and metal kits. The minor issues like the front glasses and hull fit problems with the kit are easily corrected, and are a minor annoyance rather than a significant problem with the kit. Just keep these in mind during assembly. There are also nice touches like the seam-free design for the external fuel tanks that are really nice design and engineering. But this kit does have a lot of parts, particularly the AM2 turret, so assembling a horde of these in plastic will take a while. The number of options in the kit as well as the different eras and nations who use the T-55 will make this a very versatile release. The PSC kit here will be at home in the desert, jungle, Indian mountains and African plains as well as Europe. This T-55 AM2 is shown alongside a standard Soviet T-55 I built earlier. This is a great little kit and I can see these being very popular. I'm looking forward to Battlegroup Northag and seeing what other Cold War and modern designs PSC might be adding to their range.